particular, we found 5 cases where non-contributors, in other words, not guilty people who didn't contribute to the evidence sample, were correctly excluded without the function, but were falsely included with it. In other words, this is not real cases. This is a validation study, but this is a representation of 5 cases in which the wrong person would have been accused in court. Now you might say 5 out of 439 is not that many, but rare cases matter. Individuals matter. And it's one thing, like all software systems have bugs. But what if there is no incentive for the bugs to ever go away? If the socio-technical system around the software aggressively resists review, aggressively resists debugging and iterative improvement, that's not okay, right? And that's exactly the situation that was happening. We also gave a talk at DEF CON, and this is on a YouTube video if you want to see it. We called it, "You're just complaining because you're guilty." So I said, like, what's going to happen when you say, "I'm a dog. It doesn't matter that I'm in the snow. I'm not a wolf. I'm a dog." Does anyone care? People who are accused of something, maybe in the vast majority of cases, the system is right. They were guilty. But in this case, they're wrong. And they say, "I am not guilty. My one little case matters. I am a dog, and it doesn't matter that I'm in the snow." And the system says to them, "Oh, you're just complaining because you're guilty. Go away." In other words, no incentive for iterative improvement. No incentive for debugging. Just locking it up the way it is, forever. So where is the debugging? What hope would an individual have of having seen whether a change like this would impact them? For those 6 years, 2011 to 2017, if I was someone where a bunch of exclusionary evidence got dropped, would I have any hope of knowing that that was the case? No. How could we have even found this without access to source code? And what does that say about requiring source code access to criminal justice software? Now here's a really important leap that I want everyone to make. Sometimes access to the source code will help you. In big data trained machine learning algorithms, sometimes access to the source code won't even help you, because the mischief is in the training data, not in the source code. So say, for example, I deliberately got a set of pictures of wolves in snow and dogs not, because I wanted to bias it for one decision. Now the source code is fine, no problems. The problem is in the training data. And there are real cases of this. I bet you've heard the things about facial recognition systems. What do the results of facial recognition systems say? Have you heard this one? Well, if they're developed in Asia, they're great on Asian faces and bad on non-Asian faces. Okay, that's not surprising. Okay, and if they're developed in the US, they're typically great on white men, and not so good on black men, and not so good on white women, and terrible on black women. If you haven't read that paper, the Gender Shades Project, it's a wonderful project. That's another one to Google, Gender Shades. I think you would really like the work that they're doing. They're basically saying you're training this stuff on one demographic and then trying to apply it to everybody. What the heck do you think you're doing? Right? Like, and you think that that doesn't happen all the time? We have a right to understand the explanation of a decision. We have a right to understand the demographics that a system was trained on, so we can know whether we ought to trust it in our case or not. Right? We will not get this unless we demand it. Because companies want to say, don't poke your fingers at my mistakes. Right? Go away. I don't want to show you what I'm doing. We have to insist, just like consumer protections or worker protections, it's not going to happen automatically. So if we want algorithms and software and platforms that are good for individuals, for people, for communities, for healthy societies, we are not going to get them unless we insist. Right now we are being served up platforms that are super convenient and helpful for so many things. Like, I love being able to get an Uber. I love being able to Google what to go see in Cape Town. I love the convenience of many things. But am I willing to trade away forever my rights as an individual or my desire for healthy societies? I am not. So I have to find a way to fight for both. And that is not easy. Because governments and businesses are mostly, powerful entities are mostly aligned on the interests of deciders and not so much aligned on the interests of individuals. It's the same thing, like I said, with consumer rights or workers' rights. You have to demand them. But I don't think we have a choice here. Because, locking up these systems the way they are is not going to give us the world we want. For what it's worth, I have a list of suggestions for the criminal justice space in particular, things I think can help. This is a procurement phase wish list. What the heck does that mean? Procurement is when governments go out and select, I'm going to use FST, or I'm going to use StarMix, or I'm going to use Compass, or I want software to accomplish something. I think that when public money is used for criminal justice software, and I guess I'll explain that. When public money at all, election software would be good, any kind of government software, public money, you're using public money, I think that you should require, that would be my first choice, or if not require, at least give substantial credit in the procurement phase. So like in the procurement phase of software, sometimes, do they give credit if you're like a female-owned business, for example, you get like an extra star and maybe they might prefer you, right? I want you to give credit for these things. I want credit for making available software artifacts like bug reports, internal testing plans and results, software requirements and specifications, risk assessments, design documents. So that will encourage those things to be produced and encourage those things to be shared publicly. Source code. I would like to see source code required, but I realize that many companies are like, my intellectual property, I don't want to show it to my competitors. And I get that, I do, but I can tell you 100% that I've seen more examples of intellectual property protection being used to shield a company from discovery of their mistakes than I have seen it used to protect their great ideas from a competitor. So it's one thing to say, you have a great idea, I want to give you good incentives and happy things because you have a great idea. It's another thing to say, I'm going to give you intellectual property protection so that you never have to be accountable for your misdeeds. Oh, and it's being used for both. That's something to worry about. Another thing is many times software systems in their terms of service, the long legalese documents, will have clauses that prevent third-party review or publishing of defects found. Have you ever noticed something in terms of service that says, if you benchmark our system, you cannot publish those results without our permission? I think whenever public money is used for that, they should never be allowed to say that. Who do you think you are, not allowing us, the people paying for it? Okay, fine, you want to keep your source code and you want to like hide that? Fine, but you don't even want me to poke and prod the outside of the box? Who do you think you are, right? But they get away with it because government officials, the procurement system doesn't insist. But I think it could insist, and I don't think that's too big of an ask. Another thing is access to executables for third-party testing. Sometimes, like criminal justice software, you can't even get it unless you're the police. So I think like university researchers or whatever should be able to get executables so that they can test them. Because otherwise, who's going to do it? Right? The Committee on Do you know typing software in New York that was supposed to rubber stamp that this is okay? They just rubber stamped it. They didn't look again. Like, who's going to look? You have to give it to people who will look. And another thing is scriptable interfaces to facilitate automated testing. A lot of the work that we did in that project I described to you was saying, I do not want to use FST 1,000 times manually. I want to write a script that will just pull it from input files and like, but we had to take this GUI executable and we had to make a scriptable interface, which is a lot of work. I think they should have to provide a scriptable interface, so for testing. Also, bug bounties can be good. Programs, have you heard of things where if you find a bug in software, that software vendor will pay you some money? So in general, things that reward, fund, incentivize nonprofit, third-party entities to do independent testing and find problems. I want that. Okay. So I've used the criminal justice system as an example of a socio-technical system. It's partly making decisions with software, partly making decisions with people, and why I think it's important to think about securing that system as a whole, the way we're making decisions, especially as it's rapidly changing, right? I'm going to give you one more example, and I'm going to use the example as the media. Basically, how we get our news. Has how you get your news of the world changed in the last 10 years? For me, it's changed a lot. I am much more likely to read a newspaper article that's been linked in Facebook or Twitter or something like that than I am to read a hard copy periodical. And I think that's changed a lot in the last 10 years. Other people feel like that's the same thing has happened to them. Okay, so if that's the case, and all the studies all show that it is it important for us to understand what messages we get shown? What are the algorithms that are used to determine what we're shown? Let's take your Facebook feed, for example. Does your Facebook feed include everything from all the friends that you follow, or is there a curation by which they select what to show you? There's a curation. What about Google search results? If I search for X, do I get the exact same answers as if you search for X? Or is there customization based on your physical location and things you've searched for in the past? There's customization. So, our platforms are not, it's like when you had a newspaper, a hard copy newspaper, it was showing the same face to everyone. Am I right? So now, the platforms that we use are not showing the same face to everyone. In some sense, there can be benefits to that. Like maybe you show me better ads. Like maybe in the newspaper there were ads for things I'm never going to be interested in. Now you have ads that are much more specific to what I might want. Maybe, right? That could be a good thing. That's certainly a good thing for advertisers. They like that. Whether you like it or not is another matter. But it's not a terrible thing, I think, to see ads that are more customized to you. But now, it's certainly, we like the recommendation features of something. Have you ever been shopping for something or looking for a video or whatever and been thankful to have some curation that helps suggest to you to something that is especially good for you? I would say I have enjoyed that customization at times. But is there a potential problem with it? Especially in politics. What has happened with news on these platforms is if I have to say my political message to you on TV or in a printed newspaper, I have to say one thing to everybody. And I have to deal with the fact that you might like what I have to say and you don't like what I have to say. So I have to walk that line of pleasing everyone a little bit. That moderates things. It keeps things more in the center. If I don't have to show you the same thing, then I can tell you an extreme version of exactly what you want, and I don't care if it pisses you off. Because I'm going to tell you an extreme version of what you want, and I don't care if it pisses you off. Is that happening in our political systems these days? It most certainly is. And is it driving a polarization where the middle ground can't even talk to one another anymore? Certainly is in the US. Certainly I see it happening in England and Brazil and India and pretty much happening around the world, right? Okay, so the systems and platforms that decide which messages and voices to amplify. Now, here's another example of where you can look at the systems that decided what voices to amplify in the past. You know, the editors of newspapers or the controllers of TV stations. And you can say, I didn't like them either. I think they were silencing voices that were important. I don't like their policies. Fair enough. I think that's true. But you can also look at the systems that are now and you can say, they might not be so great either. What are we going to do to decide which voices get amplified to who? And because it's a new system, it opens up whole new vulnerabilities. I have done some work, you can check out some of the papers I have on this topic, on the idea of trolling. What is trolling? Trolling is when people who use the internet kind of try to get people's attention or redirect attention by saying outrageous things, or you can think of it as like attention hacking, right? Just like you can hack into a computer system, I might try to hack into a socio-technical system. I want to draw your attention to something. I want to skew public opinion. Now we have lots of words for that. Propaganda, right? And depending, or even advertising. And depending on which set of words you use, it becomes more socially acceptable or not. But really all of it is about moving people, manipulating people, hacking people's attention. Okay? So here is an example of an attack on our media landscape. So in the US in 2017, in Charlottesville, North Carolina, there was a rally called Unite the Right. It brought together a lot of very right-wing, conservative, neo-Nazi types to Charlottesville. I don't know if you followed this case, but in this instance, there was a guy, James Field, who has now been convicted of this, but he drove a car into a group of counter-protesters. So there's peaceful. So there was this Unite the Right, very, right-wing event, and there were more left-wing counter-protesters who showed up to basically say, we don't want you here. We don't approve of that. Okay? And this guy, James Field, drove his car into some of the counter-protesters and he killed a woman. Okay? Now, in the moment, right after that happened, if you went and Googled for information, so do journalists do this? Do people do this? Like, right after something happened, you want to know what happened? You might have been delivered a completely false narrative of what happened. There was a disinformation campaign that falsely amplified the narrative that Antifa, the anti-fascists, the counter-protesters were the ones who were really responsible. They were the ones who killed that woman. And they created this meme here that actually looked like it had a lot of false facts. There was a license plate number, it was traced to someone who had nothing to do with this. Complete and utter fabrication. This real guy, James Field, has now gone, been convicted of it. But in the moment, they got people to believe that it was completely the other side that did it. How did they do that? These are attention hacking attacks on socio-technical systems. I'll give you an example of some techniques. When you go to Google for something, if there's a very common search term, it has a long history that they can rely on. If suddenly there's an event in a town or with someone's last name that nobody had been searching for, basically there's no search history, and you start to search for that, what are you going to get? In that moment, Google doesn't know what to show you, and if people attack it at that moment, they can feed information that sows a counter-narrative right in that moment. Or another thing that is an attack on this attention system is, say I'm